Hello, and welcome to a new series on Westborough TV called Kaleidoscope. I'm Dr. Mary Botticelli Christensen, and I'll be your host. I chose the name Kaleidoscope for two reasons. One, I've loved kaleidoscopes since I was a kid. I've collected them, and I just love the patterns and the creativity that you find when you just flick your wrist. But there's another reason. Kaleidoscopes give you an opportunity to shake things up a bit, look at a problem, an organization, or a product, and see how you can change it, see the patterns, and see the connections. So I'd like to welcome you to Kaleidoscope, and if you'll excuse me, I have to shake things up a bit. Welcome. My guest today is Chris Tanaka from WBZ Channel 4 News. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so happy.
I'm so excited and honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, now I want to get down to some questions that I have and that I think the general public has about a newscaster and what happens on the set and how you became one. So let's get started.
Absolutely.
I want to start way back when you were 10 years old. That's when we start to think about what do we want to be when we grow up.
Yeah.
Did broadcasting ever come into your head at that stage and you said, oh, I want to be like those men and women on television?
Never.
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 Never. So when did it start to be formulating in your head that you wanted to be a newscaster?
Yeah, when I stopped growing and I was 5'10" tall. I grew up, I think, like a lot of kids. I was involved with a lot of sports and loved to run around and play. And as I went through high school, got involved primarily with football, and we all have dreams of continuing to just to keep playing, right? What is that next step? And one luxury to living in New England is this wealth of educational choice that we have. And you never realize it growing up. You just see the world around you and it is what it is. Later in life, having the good fortune to live in other places, I've come to really appreciate the spectrum of secondary educational choices that we have here, from small colleges in quaint little New England towns to some of the foremost urban universities on the planet. So when I was making that choice of where to go to school, it was intentional that I chose the best academic school I could and put that career aside, if you will, and I knew I wasn't going to make it to the NFL. And so I made a choice to advance my academics and was fortunate enough to be accepted to Boston College. And once I went there, I said, okay, so I know I love sports. I know I'm not going to continue to be an athlete. How can I remain with sports? And that kind of narrows things down. And I looked at coaching for a little bit and decided I didn't want that life. I looked at play-by-play and announcing games. And that was a really tough field to get into, and you're committed to following a team around, and there's no guarantee that you'll ever, get to be the broadcaster for the Celtics, Patriots, or Red Sox, or Bruins. And so sports journalism was a fit, where you could talk about sports, be around sports, and really amplify the positive about them. And that's the career I fell into and followed it. And then somewhere along the way, when I had climbed all of those mountains and had achieved everything I wanted to achieve, again, a conscious decision that I wanted to be with my kids on the weekend and not in a press box following a football game. And so I was fortunate enough to make the switch to news when we were living in Hawaii, and I've loved it ever since and have been a news journalist ever since.
Well, a lot of people like me grew up with a newscaster that was our role model.
Yeah.
And for me, and I'm going to date myself on this, it was Walter Cronkite.
Yeah.
That's the way it is. You know?
Sure.
And I believed him, whatever he said. And did you have a role model for either the sports or for newscasting that you said, that's the kind of newscaster I want to be?
That's a great question. I'll stop short of saying role model. I think, you know, when we were growing up, when we were kids, very cliche to say that we watched WBZ, but that's who we did watch. And they were titans of the industry. Jack Williams, Liz Walker, Bob Lobel, Bruce Schwegler. You know, they were just written up in the Boston Globe recently. And I always thought, wow, they were larger than life. So to be part of that team now and carry on that journalistic legacy is a dream come true. But after I had made the switch to news, there's a person, he's now retired. His name's Ron Zappolo. He's actually from Framingham, but he became an icon in Denver. And I've followed the same career path he did, where he did sports for many years, and then he switched over to news, and he was the main news anchor at the station I worked at for almost 8 years. He was a newsroom leader. He was a great friend. He was a mentor, and he was a heck of a broadcaster. And so when I made that switch from sports to news, and I was trying to find my voice, I would always think of Ron. And I'd say, you know, how would Ron handle this? What would his tone be? What would his pitch be? How would he really just communicate with people at home on a one-on-one level, instead of, you know, saying, well, here I am, this camera's in front of me, and I'm broadcasting to everyone at once. He was so granular and intimate in the way he communicated with people.
Now,
and that's how I've wanted to be.
Yeah, and I think it's important to have someone that you've seen and you know how they've reacted and how the public has reacted to them. We're going to be seeing some, what you refer to as B-roll of what happens behind the scenes, because that's how I like to see the world, you know, with the one that nobody gets to see. Because everyone comes out looking so polished and professional. And that's going to be happening throughout this conversation. But I wanted to ask you, when you were in college and deciding your career choice, which did you feel was your strength? Was it the writing of the script or the presentation? Did they say, you've got a face for TV or a voice for whatever? Or was it that you really loved putting the words on the page?
That's a great, Mary, you have such good questions. It was actually neither. It was storytelling.
Okay.
And to this day, if you know, you're to ask me what is your strength you think as a journalist, it's storytelling. It's wanting to know about people, wanting to know about organizations, wanting to know about events, and then relaying them in a way that I think relates with the audience. And so sports is easy. Sports is very easy because the story unfolds, it's being told, and you are just the guide, right? It's like being the rower on a boat. The boat is the vessel, right? And in sports, the game is that vessel. You're simply the one who just kind of, you know, is along for the ride in many ways, but helps it here, helps it there. With news, it's so much more complex because every story is different. And that's the challenge that I really enjoy, is how to distill a topic into something that's palatable for an audience and understandable and relatable.
And it does come across on TV that you're telling a story rather than reading a script or coming from memory about something in a rote fashion. There's a time when you said you were a sportscaster, but I see you on the broadcast now doing the news. And I know you mentioned that had been part of your transition. But I wanted to talk, before we get into that, a little bit about your journey. Now, you went a long way out of your way to come back a short distance, which is a paraphrasing of a famous quote. I didn't realize that you were a New Englander and that you went to, BU. or BC, I'm
BC,
sorry.
yeah.
And that you had, your roots here.
Yeah.
That you were as far away as Hawaii, and you had met your beautiful wife while you were in this career move around.
Yeah.
But there are both intellectual challenges and personal challenges to this kind of job that you have.
Yeah.
Because it seems like you have to, as part of the process, start out at the bottom and keep moving around and moving up. And so that takes you in all different directions. How did you manage a relationship when you first started with getting into a serious relationship, and then that choice that you made with regards to your family life?
Yeah. So I married up. You know Shannon, my wife. She's beautiful inside and
Yes.
outside, and she's great, and she's, we are partners in everything we do. I think it helped a lot initially with our relationship that we were both journalists and could commiserate and understand the challenges of the industry, which does include physical moves, but also includes great sacrifice. There's no such thing as a holiday in television because there's always a broadcast. So we often work weekends, we work nights, we have our schedules readjusted, and those are huge challenges to all relationships, not only spouses, but children as well. So her understanding of the industry was critical in how we cultivated our relationship between ourselves. As far as the moves, I think I've been very fortunate in so much as I've always maintained that I want my career to be about my life. I don't want my life to be about my career.
Oh.
And so a lot of people give everything to their career because it's what they are. And my career is very important, but I didn't want it to consume me. So along the way, we were married and we lived in Denver, and it's a beautiful place, and Colorado is a magnificent state. But we always said if we had the opportunity to move to Hawaii, we would. And we got that opportunity. And so we reinvented ourselves as a couple and we moved there. And when our two beautiful boys were born on the island of Oahu, we had to make a choice. And we knew that we were just too far away from family. And so we returned to the mainland, and we're fortunate to, people always say, their eyes bug out when we say we're fortunate to land in Cleveland, Ohio. But I have extensive family there. I have an aunt who lives there, and it was such a serendipitous move and a soft landing back to the mainland, coming from a place where the cost of living is exorbitant to one where you can really get ahead. And then from there, having this opportunity kind of materialize out of thin air a year and a half ago was ultimate serendipity. And it just felt like the universe was carrying us to a place where we belong. So, yeah.
And so you commute into Boston,
Yeah.
and you have your privacy here in Westborough, and that seems to be a good balance so that you're not so intense on work. You can come to a place that's a little
You can
quieter.
breathe here, right?
In that newscasting now that you did, the sports was another part of your life. Was there one story that you covered or that you were part of at the time it was changing and coming on as, breaking news, which is always seems like blasting across the screen? Was there any story that really affected you deeply and that you still carry with you? Like that it's something that was very traumatic, but you had to still go out and be the professional and give the truth to the public?
Yeah, there are many. There are many. And, I think most recently within the state of Massachusetts, you look at the suffering that the people of Leominster endured this past summer with that flooding, but then also the people of Lewiston, Maine, who suffered when that crazed gunman took 18 lives. And so we were up there, and I broadcasted there for a full day. And you have to, I think we all deal with highly stressful and traumatic and emotional situations differently. For me, I have to let some of that in to really understand the pain and but also to be able to convey, the better part of it, which is the strength of the people. And so what we did is we went out and we just had conversations. And we didn't stick a microphone in people's faces. We didn't bring cameras into these shops. Just had honest conversations. And I think from those conversations, I was able to most accurately and compassionately report on what people were feeling, what they were going through, in addition to the latest information on the search for the gunman and the steps law enforcement was taking and what they needed us as the Fourth Estate to communicate to a broad audience, which was, certain closures, don't do this, do that, we're going to update you here and now, etc.
And as parents, and as a grandparent, and as a teacher, the ones that have to do with children at risk, especially in a place we hope is safe, just is so traumatic because it touches so close to home. We have children in school. I was teaching in a school in which there was a shooting outside at the university, and I'm thinking, as the mother, I have all these students to care for and make sure that they're safe. So I can understand how that one, especially since you have young children in middle school. Now, I'm going to ask you about a personal question about when your children first saw you on television. Because that must have been a very interesting concept for them. Did they ever, when they were little, did they see you on TV and react to you? Did you hear stories about, they're waving to you? I was on a television show in Connecticut, and my children were like in kindergarten and first grade, and I'm watching it with them because it was taped. And they're crying and looking at me, Mommy, you're not waving back.
Oh, my
and they
goodness.
didn't understand the connection. Does your son, or now they're getting embarrassed because they're in middle school and they go, please, Dad, just don't be on TV.
So the first thing is that I always tell Shannon, don't let them watch. But when they have seen me on, at first it was always, Daddy, he's on TV. And now they're just like, meh. They've also been a part of a couple of promotional campaigns that I've done. So they themselves have had FaceTime on television as well. But for them, this is just what I do. And they understand it, and it's gotten a little old. We have one of our rooms, and I have some awards. And when one of my son's friends came over, he was looking at me, he said, oh my God, this, oh my gosh, that. And my son's like, man, whatever it may be. Yeah, exactly. And that's the best thing. That's the best thing. I'm just Dad. I try my hardest. I want to be present. I want to be involved with them. It doesn't matter what I do, because what I do is not who I am. Right? My actions at home define who I am to them. And so, even though I have a public-facing job, they get it. I'm just Dad. I have good days and bad days. They can, beat the heck out of me on video games, and that's what they really care about.
Yeah. Who won the last game?
Exactly.
Well, that's the balance between being the present person, the storyteller on air that comes through very clearly, and the person who's made the choice of how you want to live your personal life and your passion of doing the news. Back to the news on a different format. And I've always wondered, when you write up your piece and you do write your own scripts, do you have to pass it to the producer, pass it to the higher ups to edit it, or do you just get to go on and they trust your instincts?
So there are two processes involved. When I'm anchoring a newscast, we have what's called a rundown, and that's simply a map of what we're going to do, how it's going to be presented, and what we're talking about in the course of that 30-minute newscast. And that's a collaborative writing process.
Yeah.
I will write and copy edit every single script, but then there might be an executive producer who tweaks a little bit. And so, there isn't a hard and fast final say, because it's a team of professionals who could all write accurately for a finished product, but most of what I do will be to reformat it in a way that I communicate. So I always say to young people entering the business, don't read a script, talk a script. And you know, we harken back to Walter Cronkite, where the industry used to be much more formal. I think now it's much more communicative, where we're just trying to talk to people. And I won't use improper grammar, but it's okay for me to use, you know, everyday speech.
Yeah.
And so that's how I'll do it. When it comes to writing stories that are going to be self-contained in a newscast, for example, I'm working on one about the price of healthy and nutritious foods, especially with the new year, how people are trying to get into shape, and one component of that is increased nutrition. I will craft that story how I want to tell it. And so it's important for me to touch on not only you know, the marketing blitz that we face as consumers, where healthy is a premium, right? But I wanted to touch on food insecurity in Massachusetts, because that's important to me, that people get the full story. You know, this story isn't being written for one specific audience that has X amount of dollars of buying power. It's also being written to understand that there are a lot of people who don't have that and don't have that choice. So when I'm writing a story that's going to air, that's going to be self-contained, I have far more autonomy to craft it the way I want it to be presented. And then we'll have coworkers go over and read the script and say, yeah, that's good. But within the body of a newscast, it's a collaborative effort. Everyone's got their hands in it, and it's just ultimately made in a way that is accurate, right? Is important, but is also in a way that I would talk it.
Yes. And you did mention once when we were speaking, and I was asking you to do this, that you felt such complete trust with your colleagues that you were never worried about whether the story was going to be told correctly, or that there was any not enough research to make sure that the truth was at the basis of what you were telling. And I think that speaks highly of the station and the broadcast group. And you don't think about those decisions that you have to make, you know, in a workplace, to make sure that truth isn't something that you have to usually worry about if you're sitting at a desk and just going through your daily routine. But in broadcasting, that's the basis of the whole process, is to tell the truth. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about one question and your answer to it. And I want you to think about the completion of this statement.
Okay.
Broadcasting is.
News broadcasting is?
Yes.
That's a great question. All right. News broadcasting is, at its core, a utility for its community to use for its betterment.
And to you personally, it is?
The same thing, because I'm an idealist.
Well, on that note, between the critics out in this audience, but your harshest critics, your sons, I think you pass all the criteria for being the storyteller and the truth teller. So I'm so excited that you've been here on the opening of the Kaleidoscope series, and I wish you well, and I'll be watching you, and I'll be waving, but you won't see me.
I'll see you around town, though.
Yes, you will see me around
Absolutely.
town.
Yeah.
And thank you again.
Thank you so much, Mary. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Okay. And thank you all for joining us.